Our fate had been written. At least, that is what we believed. Until you died.
The year is 2012. It's my sophomore year of high school, and the world is coming to its supposed end. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim had just come out, and I had woken up Christmas Day, the year before, excited as hell to play it after having opened the obvious PS3 case-shaped gift under the tree. However, another game caught my eye just a few months after that on a trip to GameStop. I remember seeing a billboard advertisement and seeing its eye-catching cover art of a warrior holding a sword and a hammer. The RPG lover in me had to give it a try, so I bought it. I had only spent roughly 5 hours with the game before I made the switch back over to the Xbox 360 to play with my high school friends. Kingdoms of Amalur vanished into the void that is life, and I didn't purchase another copy of it until 2017 after building my second PC. By that point, I had already accumulated a 100 game backlog and I never got around to playing it. Here we are in 2025, and I bought Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning on my since new Steam account during the spring sale, where it sat for months until November, when I was sitting at work thinking about it. I came home, fired it up, and made it my goal to 100% it before starting any other game. I have now completed my goal in about 2 months and 130 hours of playtime. I've earned all the achievements and experienced all the game has to offer. I would like to say I completed all the quests, but we will get to that in a bit. This game lived up to the expectations I set for it, and my dream of completing it has been lived. The remaster of Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning, specifically the Fate Edition, is what I will be discussing today. The game received a mid-review from IGN, with the author stating that the game is a reminder of what made the original great in 2012, but mostly a testament to how far we've come. And I'd like to state that while he is correct in his verbiage, I believe giving Re-Reckoning a 6 out of 10 is uncalled for. The game itself is phenomenal, and expecting anything other than what was offered in 2012, save for a few minor graphics improvements and gameplay bug fixes, is asking for more than you purchased. Re-Reckoning was never sold as some grandeur remake like Square Enix is offering with the in-progress Final Fantasy VII trilogy. You bought something 10 years old at the time and got something 10 years old. No shit, it doesn't have anything new RPGs offer. I've read quite a few IGN reviews over the years, and I've watched them get worse and worse as time goes by. Now with that rant out of the way, let's get into my experience with the game. You as the player play as the Fateless One. You start the game with a basic character creation, selecting a race, appearance, and finally a god to worship, which give bonuses that, while are small and ultimately are inconsequential, can help just a tad throughout the game, especially early on if you want to spend skill points elsewhere. You will eventually far outweigh any of the options you pick, and you could truthfully go through the whole game without spending skill points, so don't think that much into them. Once the character creation is complete, you'll be dumped into a pile of bodies by some gnomes left for dead, until you wake up. Making your way through corridors, you see the facility you are in is being raided by some dark figures, the Tuatha, your main adversaries throughout the main story. You run into the gnome who dumped you, who urges you to speak with the professor who created the facility. Upon finding him, the Tuatha make a push into the library. The brave gnome tells you to escape, as you were his only successful creation. After the first boss fight, after the scene, you are then shoved out into the world of Amalur, right outside of a town known as Gorhart. You then meet a Fate Weaver named Aarth. A Fate Weaver is a person who has the innate ability to view Fate's tapestry through a person, or in other words, their destiny. They can see what you will do, even how you will die. However, he is unable to read yours. Your conversation will be interrupted by yet again Tuatha, and once you finish mopping them up, the story sets off, and most importantly, you are free to do as you please. During that conversation, you get to select a destiny. Destinies are based on what tree you put your ability points into, whether it be might, finesse, or sorcery, and you receive a bonus based on that once you've satisfied the ability point requirement. One of the great things about Kingdoms of Amalur is you are free to stick to one or mix and match. If you want to be a warrior swinging a hammer and use a bow for your secondary, you can stack points into might and finesse to make use of both of those. Maybe you want to be a stealth build and use daggers and a bow, or even the proprietary weapon type Kingdoms of Amalur uses known as the Fey Blades, which has the capability of stealth takedowns while also allowing you to spin and dance in a flurry of attack, focused solely on finesse. If you can't decide, no problem. They allow you to mix all three into a jack-of-all-trades destiny that lets you swap equipment at will, and by level 36, you could potentially wear all equipment in the game, regardless of stat requirements. You get to choose and aren't held back in any regard, and that is one of the beauties of this game. This level of control you have with your character lets you find a way to enjoy every moment you spend in this world. When I originally played the game back in 2012, I remember playing as my role-playing moniker, a stealth archer with daggers. I play most of my RPG games like this. There's something about taking out hordes of enemies unseen that fascinates me. However, for this playthrough, I made it my goal to not do that. I started out using a might/sorcery build, using a hammer as my primary to do calculated heavy damage to close enemies, and use a sorcery tree chakrams, another proprietary weapon type, to reach enemies further out and apply status effects. Chakrams are spinning discs that you throw towards your enemies, frequently pushing them back slightly and applying a burner ice effect, hindering them before they moved in close enough to get walloped by my giant mallet. But then something happened. Around level 20, several hours into the game, and about the time I was finishing up one of the expansions, Legend of Dekel, I found myself becoming bored. I was enjoying the story, the world, and soaking up what the game had to offer, but for some reason, arguably the best part of the game, the combat, began to bore me, and I found myself avoiding it as much as possible. Not due to difficulty, which I played through on hard for the achievement by the way, but because it just wasn't fun anymore. The level of control offered to me by the developers saved me. I ran to a Fate Weaver and decided to try a full sorcery build because I never used magic in games. I ran a staff primary with Chakram secondary staying put. The new experience of casting flurries of spells, waving my staff, destroying my enemies with ear-crushing spells breathed new life into me. I had to relearn when to time attacks, to not get animation locked, and it was like starting a whole different game. And guess what? Eventually I got bored of that and switched to a dagger and bow build without being stealthy to find out how damn fun the late game dagger gameplay is. Just to change again 3 or 4 more times. Everything was just so fun to use and it kept me going through my playthrough. No matter what discipline you choose, you're going to have a blast. If you stopped enjoying the game, fuck it, give that power back to yourself because you can. I mentioned at level 20 I was working on finishing an expansion. That doesn't mean I completed the base game, it means I wanted to hop into a different story. I was only a handful of quests into the main story at the time and had already completed 2 faction quests, the House of Summer and War Swarm. This game gives you complete questing freedom, just like the Elder Scrolls series. Get bored of what you're learning about or playing to? Move on, buddy. Nothing is holding you to it. This game is full of great quests. They aren't all hits, and some are quite forgettable, but some of the minute side quests are funny or add a little bit of flavor to the world, expanding the lore and making the world feel alive. The original Kingdoms of Amalur release received 2 expansions, The Legend of Dekel and The Teeth of Naros, which are included in the base Re-Reckoning release. The Fate Edition launched with all new to Re-Reckoning expansion called Fatesworn, which has about 20 hours of gameplay for a completionist. Besides Fatesworn, the prior mentioned ones are separate from the rest of the game's story. They have their own areas to explore with their own side quests and activities. Don't be afraid to start these at any point in your playthrough, but do keep in mind The Legend of Dekel will lock you to that area for a few hours of gameplay unless you focus on the main story to get to the point you're able to return to the mainland. I won't spoil anything, but there is a lot of content to be explored that will help you in the main game to explore in these. Fatesworn itself is inaccessible until after the main story has been completed and you reach level 30, which by then, if you have done a bit of exploring, should be a non-issue. I was level 44 before even starting Fatesworn, but it was the last piece of content I had to explore. In the world of Amalur, you will come across a few different kinds of races and beasts. These are the playable human races of the Almayn and Barani, and the elf races of Dakofar and Losofar that you will also run into throughout the world. There are the aforementioned gnome race, and then there are the Fae. The Fae are elf-like in how they look, but their lives are different in the sense that they never die. They experience their lives through the Great Cycle, living to a role, and once completing their life, their soul returns to be reborn again to relive the same experience. They are a being of magic, true to their nature. As far as beasts you encounter, they are plentiful, but by the time you are in Fatesworn, you do get kind of tired of experiencing the same fights regardless of playstyle. You have a base of about 20 different beasts off the top of my head that just grow stronger over time with new status effects, more health, and faster pacing. Once you've learned to fight one of each, you've fought them all essentially. You will learn which ones to focus to not become overwhelmed with time, and ones that are just going to be annoying to fight regardless of your progression and skill set. Once you're late game, however, you do have the muscle memory and knowledge, and you truly feel like a god moving around their attacks and beating them up without being touched, no matter how many there are on the field in front of you. With this generalized idea of the world and gameplay I've provided, I'd like to discuss some concerns I have with the game. I'd like to start off by saying my ultimate goal was to complete every single quest in the game, which is as close to 300 of them, and loot every single hidden item that there was with the use of the Detect Hidden skill to have a nice clean map and get to really explore every ounce of dialogue and lore the game has to offer, because I enjoy it that much. I ended up giving up on this venture once I hit an issue during my Dead Kell expansion playthrough where I had a quest become glitched. I was unable to proceed any further due to a quest giver not accepting the items he requested, and in a rather important faction quest, not just a small side quest. That blocked off over 9 quests in that storyline for me, and with a Google browse, I tried every single fix I could, spending about 2 hours on it. The only 2 options I had left were loading a save file from way earlier before starting the expansion because my hour before save file wasn't enough, or completely start over with a new save in hopes that it wouldn't happen again. For the sake of getting through the game, I gave up on this venture. Shortly before that, I got to the final boss of the Legend of Dekel. There's a dialogue you have with the said boss beforehand, at which point after they become an attackable enemy. For some reason, although he was attacking me, I was unable to attack the boss. I thought this was a mechanic, and I became extremely frustrated trying to understand what I was missing. I watched a YouTube guide on defeating them, and the guide showed them doing damage with no problem. I ultimately ended up loading 2 to 3 saves back to finally be able to do damage to him. I'm unsure of what glitch transpired, but that took an hour of time getting back to that point. Between these 2 glitches in this expansion alone, I became paranoid of any of the others that may have appeared. I already saved roughly every 20 minutes or so, but I began saving about every 5 minutes after this, ultimately hitting the save file limit and deleting the oldest ones as I went. I didn't want to end up being progression locked and kill tons of my time, as I have a lot of other games to get through and real obligations to tend to. That is my biggest gripe of the game. As a completionist and as someone who wanted to explore everything it had to offer, it made me afraid to do so. Glitches like this are common with games of this expanse, and it's tough to prevent them all, but searching through other issues I experienced, I saw complaint upon complaint of different glitches people were experiencing. I'm happy to say I finished just over 200 of the game's quests, and those 2 errors in the Legend of Dead were my only memorable ones, save for a couple Google searches as to why I wasn't progressing because the quest log and NPC dialogue didn't give me enough to go off of. One of my guilty pleasures is audio. I have a very nice audio setup to provide me with a great rendition of what the audio designers wanted you to experience and what music producers did on that front. This game's soundtrack is great, as are a lot of the sound effects and ambiance. However, the mixing of these in the environment are atrocious. The default audio settings have audio levels all over the place, with voices being far too loud or quiet, or the game's sound effects completely overpowering the music and being egregiously loud in comparison to anything else. When I switched to the staff and chakrams build, this was extremely apparent, as the staff's magical effects from its base attacks were mixed extremely loud in comparison to any other abilities and weapons in the game. I found myself constantly adjusting the in-game audio sliders, often finding myself having one bar all the way to the right, with one all the way to the left, and the other somewhere in between. Cutscene dialogue became louder than in-game dialogue, and the audio quality of the video cutscenes was god-awful across the board, with tons of distortion. The poor quality LimeWire and Pirate Bay audio rips you got in the early 2000s sounded no better than these did. Getting into the last bit of my experience with the game, none of the achievements were abysmal, and were all very straightforward. Hard difficulty becomes laughable, and while I never tried it, I assumed the very hard difficulty wouldn't have been much different based on the fact that I was killing endgame Fate-sworn monsters with the flick of my greatsword on hard, without having fully upgraded it. There are a couple I had to base my builds around to ensure that I didn't miss anything, so just trying to keep persuasion as high as possible, not to miss any of those opportunities. I didn't count, but I'd say there are close to 100 attempts in the game, and you needed to succeed on 50 of them, so you can't really afford to lose any. 50 chest lockpicking and dispelling are also missable, but there are an astronomical amount of opportunities throughout the game for these. I'd say the one that you need to watch out for most is the Manic Pixie achievement in Legend of Dead that requires you to make the right calls on multiple dialogue options with the main NPC, and if you fail, requires you to start a new save, reach level 10, and redo all of the Legend of Dead main story. Stepping into the Fate-sworn achievements, while I was trying to experience all the game had to offer, and I was enjoying the new areas to explore, this part of my playthrough, the last 30 hours or so, were my least enjoyable. I'm not sure if it was burnout after putting 100 hours in, or just the repetition, but Fate-sworn's areas don't have a lot of fast travel options, and you will be doing a lot of walking. And during a moment I was trying to hustle through it to get the game finished, the walking was a barrier to my prize. The side quests were fun, but required a lot of moving around the map, and without fast traveling after having copious amounts of options in the mainland, really stuck a knife in my side. Just when I thought I was about through with the game, the Chaos Portal mechanic opened up in the main story of the expansion. One of the achievements is to close all 25 of those portals, which entails traveling all over Amalur and sealing anywhere between 2 to 5 mini portals to then enter a large one where you must destroy the core to close the main portal. Inside each portal are copious amounts of enemies that have chaos armor. The issue I have with this mechanic is damage done to chaos armor does not carry over into the base health when it breaks, which causes you to have to take extra swings at the enemies. The amount of enemies to defeat in these areas added a lot of time to get through it. Once inside the portal, you are then in the chaos realm, which is essentially long paths of caves with levers you must pull to open doors to find the core to destroy, and it's a lot like a maze. That's 25 mazes, full of enemies with double the health and with double the enemies most of the game throws at you. This was a slog to say the least, and I admit I ended up just sprinting by most of them for the last 20 portals or so. I couldn't take it anymore. Again, a lot of running around to complete the game that didn't jive with me, but that may ultimately be on me for trying to satiate a hunger for that 100%. Overall, I enjoyed Re-Reckoning and its expansions. The world was amazing, the combat and exploration was satisfying regardless of whatever a Dingleberry and IGN says, and I believe it holds a candle in the halls of some of the greatest action RPGs there are. If you're someone who's been looking for a new fix in the genre, I can't recommend this game enough to you. I'm happy to have led the Fateless One's journey to the end, and I'm happy they helped me meet my own fate of completing their journey that was set out for me back in 2012.